Leadership is not proven by the title you hold. It is revealed by the people who you grow. Welcome to the Voice of Impact, where belief meets action. Our podcast amplifies stories and systems behind meaningful change. I'm your host, Robert Ndoping. Today's conversation is about leadership, not the performative version built on status or charisma, but the kind rooted in character, identity, and human connection. Because in a world obsessed with titles and outcomes, the leaders who leave the greatest impact are often the ones who build trust, develop people, and create cultures others want to follow. My guest today is Jim Carlough, a leadership transformation expert, executive coach, keynote speaker, and best-selling author, whose work is helping organizations rethink what leadership truly means. Over more than 30 years, Jim has led enterprise transformations across healthcare, SaaS, and services, scaling organizations from startups to billion-dollar enterprises while driving significant growth, cultural transformation, and operational success. But what makes Jim's work especially powerful is his belief that leadership is not something people are simply born with. It's something intentionally developed. Known as the leadership identity architect, Jim helps leaders build confidence, clarity, and influence through what he calls character-driven leadership, grounded in integrity, focus, compassion, empathy, stability, and even humor. He's the author of the 6 Pillars of Effective Leadership, a roadmap to success, a practical framework designed to help leaders at every level to cultivate that human qualities which drives lasting impact. Drawing from decades of real-world executive experience, Jim blends strategy, accountability, and humanity, helping organizations build leadership who don't just inspire people, but empower them to thrive. Jim, welcome to the Voice of Impact today.
Hey, Robert, thank you for having me here. I'm so excited to be here and to have a chat with you about leadership. I value your opinion and your work, and we're going to have a good time.
Yes, I know we're going to have a good time. Jim, as we always do on the Voice of Impact, before the framework, the coaching, the book, we'd love to start with you, your own experience and journey. What experiences shaped your understanding of leadership and led you to what you're doing right now?
So it probably goes back to, oh, way, way back. I very much believe that life experiences push you on a track of a directional track one way or the other. And I grew up, where were we? Okay, so I had a normal childhood. I would say normal childhood, with one exception. At the age of 8, uh, I got called down to the school principal's office, and so did my brother. And waiting there for us was a police officer. And he said, "I'm taking you guys home for the day." And when we got home, we learned that our oldest brother, who was in Vietnam, had been killed in action. And my dad, who was a World War II veteran, hit him extremely hard. He had been an extrovert, um, somewhat comical and funny, and this completely changed the man. And he told us younger three from that very day that we were going to college no matter what. And we did not have a choice in that matter. And when dad made a decision, he stuck with that decision. He often said, I don't know how we're going to pay for it, but you're all going to college. Our brother, who unfortunately lost his life, had chosen to go into a trade as opposed to into college. And my oldest sister, she was in college and graduated, and she was actually teaching. It was her first year of teaching as well. So that was something that we all had to deal with and wrestle with in the family in our own various ways. But it was interesting. We grew up in a tiny little town of 13,000 people. And it felt like as we were growing up, somebody was always there who had our back. No matter where I went, no matter what I was doing, I was always on good behavior because I never knew who was watching, right? And I think I get when you talk about leadership, to me, leadership is 24/7. And, it starts when you put your feet on the floor in the morning, get out of bed, and it doesn't stop till after you go to sleep. And so to me, at a young age, knowing that whatever I did, my parents would probably find out about, and that might not be a good thing. So we were not troublemakers by any stretch of the imagination. We were all decent students in school. I did go to college, as did my other brother and other sister. Well, actually, she went to a small business school for a two year program. But that kind of really started it off. And we were always giving back. My dad had been a volunteer fireman in the town. I had been a volunteer on the first aid and rescue squad. And when I got to college and I really started to study, I started to think about what am I going to do in life? And I decided to get a degree in psychology only because I knew I could use that to springboard virtually into an advanced degree or law school or something other than being a psychologist, but just understanding the human mind and how people react and how people do things. And I think that started to form in me the potential of what is it about human nature that makes people do the things that they do. And and I can point to a number of things in life. But when I got out of college in 1983, I actually ran for a local political office and I won at the age of 22. And I was served 2 terms as a city councilman. But what really changed my mind was one conversation about 2 weeks after the election. 2 weeks after the election, I got a phone call from the city administrator. Now, I wasn't even sworn into office yet because your election was November, you were sworn in January 1. And I went in to see him and we sat down and we started talking. And he said, I want you to do me a favor. And I had no idea what he was going to go with his conversation. And I said, okay, what would you like me to do? He said, look, he said, you're bright, you're smart. It's clear people liked you and responded to you, or you wouldn't be sitting in this office today. But what I want you to do is something very different. At night, when you put your head on the pillow, I want you to ask yourself one question. And that question was, did I do anything today for my own personal self benefit that was at the expense of another individual, group of individuals, or organization? And then he went on and said, if you answer yes to that question, you need to immediately do 2 things. You need to figure out how to unwind it, and then also how to never do it again. And if you can do it and you answer no, you can rest peacefully that night. Ever since that night in November of 1983, I ask myself that question when I put my head on the pillow. I have never said yes to that question. And that has guided me through business, through life. And to me, integrity is the non negotiable pillar in my framework. Without integrity, you cannot build trust with your team. If your team knows that you're not being truthful with them and transparent with them, they will never follow you as a leader. And if they did give you that trust and the one day something happens and you break that trust, it is virtually impossible to ever repair it to the level that it was. So for me, that taught me a very valuable lesson. It taught me to treat people how I want to be treated, taught me to be honest with people, also told me to be fair. And so if you were to ask somebody who has ever worked for me, what's Jim like to work with? And I think they'll tell you a couple of things. Number one, he's going to tell you the truth. Whether you like it or not, he's going to tell you the truth. Number two, he'll always have your back. And number three, he will never let you down. And one of the best things that has happened to me in my career is I'm usually the first phone call when somebody decides to quit their job. And their first question is, do you have any openings? I've had several people who have actually called at the right time when I did have a position, and they've worked for me several different times in their career. And each time I've helped make them better and better and better. And so the framework I've actually instilled in a lot of people. And I started to think a couple years ago, when I retire, what am I going to do? Because if I don't have something to do, my wife is going to leave me a list of things to do that I am not going to be interested in doing. That's a non-starter for me. So I decided, I thought, I've done all this mentoring over the years. Could I mentor people at scale? And and I wanted to know, and I did a lot of public speaking throughout my career. And so I wanted to be able to get on stage and talk about the framework and talk about the disservice that companies give by not having true leadership programs and how much it costs them for what I call these accidental managers. We have a habit around the world that when a manager quits, we look at the team and we take the best technical resource we can find and we anoint them as manager. And I call them accidental leaders because they didn't ask for the job. They were asked to walk in and step into that job. But an interesting thing happens. Within 12 to 14 months, some of the team gets disillusioned because they don't feel like they're growing and developing. And usually around 24 to 36 months, that leader starts to question their own ability to lead. And the sole reason is they've never developed a leadership identity. They went from individual contributor to manager slash leader, but never made the identity transition in their mind. So if I was to approach you as my boss or manager, and you were that accidental leader, the way you would respond would be typically, well, here's how we solve this problem. But that doesn't teach me anything. That just gives me the answer. And people want to grow and they want to develop and they want to improve. And so it starts to all fall apart. In fact, Gallup did a survey on this very problem. And they found that accidental leaders, approximately 85% of them fail within 36 months, all because they don't have a roadmap. And so I give them a roadmap.
Yeah, Jim, thank you. Thank you for really expanding. I think we're gonna get a little bit deeper into that. And but I wanna go back a little bit into one of the things you talked about, but I want to frame it a little bit differently. I mean, one of the things you do is you challenge one of those oldest ideas in leadership where leaders are either born or developed or both. I want to really tap into your knowledge as to how do you think this could be a limiting belief?
So here's why I can tell you that it's the biggest lie in business that leaders are born that way. And I think people use that as an excuse because they don't want to consider that person for leadership. But let me tell you about I was not born a leader. My dad was not a leader. My dad was a carpenter. His dad was a mason. My great grandfather was a chicken farmer. There's no leadership in any of those genetic tracks. And so when I stepped up, actually, it was in high school and ran for something in high school and won, was when I started to think about being a leader. And then getting out of college, the year I graduated, being asked to run for city government. I mean, I didn't just come up with this idea. I was approached by two different political parties to say, you're very civic minded, you're very active in the community. We'd like to have you run with us in the upcoming election. So I had to make a choice. Did I want to go with team A or team B? But it was at that point that I was really saying, I'm stepping into this leadership thing seriously. In fact, when my book came out and an article came out about the book, one of my high school schoolmates posted on Facebook, Jim, you really took that leadership thing really seriously, didn't you? And I took that as a compliment because it really has become my work. And it is something that you have to develop and focus on. The world is always changing and we're always adapting. And I always wanted to make sure that I was going to be successful and be part of that. And so I've had great mentors and leaders. Now, everybody has had the boss from health at one point in their career, usually somewhere along the line. And I've heard tons of stories, and I had my share as well. But there are several people that were in my career path for a long time that really believed in me and invested in me and instilled more things in me with regard to how to be a better leader and be more effective. And a lot of that comes out through the book, in the fact of the pillars. So in the book, we talk about a pillar. I talk about how you could implement it, but I also give the listeners or the readers one other thing. I also give them some names of people that they would recognize that exhibit or used that characteristic in their leadership style. Because I don't believe that any book should be the reference book for everything. But I do believe that, and I don't believe that I'm the smartest person in the room. So I want people to know that there are other people who use that characteristic in their leadership and they use it in a big way. And so I'll give you one example. In the chapter on integrity, I talk about Satya Nadella, the chairman of Microsoft. When he walked into Microsoft, I think it was 2014, he basically laid down the requirement that we are going to operate with absolute integrity. And he has done that. And Microsoft is a obviously worldwide billion trillion dollar company, whatever they are, but they're a big part of everybody's life because everybody's using a computer. It's either a Mac or it's a Windows based, or it could be a Mac with Windows on it. But Satya Nadella really did an amazing thing with Microsoft, and it was all by leading with integrity.
So I really want to go a little deeper now into your book, since you already started talking about your book. So your book outlines six pillars of effective leadership: integrity, focus, compassion, stability, empathy, and humor. Why these six?
So when I started thinking about mentoring at scale, I said, I have to have credibility. So being a mentor to so many people over the years, I started to make a list of everything by individual that I help them overcome with my mentoring. And the list was about 15 to 18 items long. And I said, I can't ask people to implement 18 things. They're just going to walk away from it. So I started to narrow it down by the number of people that needed specific help in specific areas. The most challenging thing I found for people was empathy and compassion. And so in the book, when I talk about empathy or compassion or any of the pillars, I also tell a story about a story from my own life of when that pillar was used. And so I teach, and my workshops teach with a lot of exercises, role playing, and storytelling. And and if you want to build a highly successful team that will follow you into battle, is how I think about it. You've got to have these six pillars because they're very, very important. And I'll tell you a story. Empathy. Now, unlike compassion, com I can show you compassion for something, but I can't necessarily solve it for you. With empathy, I have to understand the situation that you're in and see where I can help you. So a few years back, I had a woman who worked for me who was a single mom with an ex-husband who was not involved in their lives anymore. And she had a 12-year-old son. And that 12-year-old son was on summer vacation. And this was around late July. And I started to think, this person hasn't had a day off or a week off, and her son's on vacation. So we were having a meeting, a one-on-one meeting on a Wednesday morning. And I said to her, after this meeting, I want you to turn your phone off and I want you to turn your computer off. And I don't want to hear from you until next Monday. And I said, and I also don't want you taking it as PTO time. You have been busting your butt. You've been working long hours, and it's time for me to give you something back. I'm giving you the time to take 5 days to be with your son. He's 12 years old, the middle of puberty, which is a challenge for everybody, but he didn't have a dad in his life and he needed his mom. And as a good salesperson, she said to me, can we negotiate this? And I laughed. And then she said, but let me explain. She said, I promised a customer a major deliverable for this Friday. I have to be able to deliver it. If you make me shut my phone and computer off, I can't deliver on my commitment. So can I take the time off next week? I said, because you have a client commitment, the answer is yes, you can. But again, you're not taking it as PTO time. You're going to log your time as if you were working, and your sole purpose is to spend it with your son. The following Monday, after she took the time off, she came in and to the office. We're remote, so she calls me on the phone. And she was quite emotional, but she thanked me for calling her out and forcing her to do something that she was overlooking. And she thanked me because it was the best thing she ever did for her son. And they spent a lot of quality time together because she knew if I saw her on email or if I saw her sending me a voicemail message, that I was going to pick up the phone and call her and tell her to stop. But to me, that's my job as a leader. I have to notice when, if you're always walking in the office every morning with a big old smile on your face and a cup of coffee in your hand and saying hi to everybody, and then on next Tuesday you walk in and you've got the coffee in your hand, but you're not smiling and you're not jovial like you always are. If I'm a good leader, I'm going to approach you and ask you if everything's okay. You may have a sick child at home. You may have a sick spouse. You may have a sick dog. Who knows? But if you're not yourself, I got to figure out how to fix it. I got to figure out whether there's an opportunity to make it a better day for you. And if I don't, then I'm not a good leader. And I think that's where these accidental managers fall down because they can't make that connection.
Yeah, that's pretty deep. I want to touch on something else, though related to your book, but leadership in our current AI-driven world. What's your opinion on the direction of leadership in a world that is really being overpowered by AI these days?
AI cannot replace leadership. AI cannot show integrity. AI cannot show empathy or compassion. AI may be able to tell you a joke, but it's probably taken from the internet. It's not something that they came up with. So AI is not going to negatively impact leadership at all. AI is going to bring more data to us quicker, faster, or whatever, but somebody's going to need to deal with that. I'll pick on Google for a second. A year ago, Google laid off a whole bunch of people because of AI. And last November, they hired nearly 50% of them back. And then they continued to hire them back because they realized that AI gave them data, but AI couldn't implement or complete those tasks. Somebody else still had to do something. And so, will AI impact the workforce? I believe the answer is yes, but it's going to impact it in a way that it means I don't have to think about how to solve this problem. I could type in a prompt. How should I go about solving this problem? It's going to give me some ideas back, but it's not going to automate the creation of those ideas or that process. Now, there are some business processes that could be automated with AI or even without AI that we could probably eliminate some positions, but I don't believe in eliminating them. I believe in elevating the skill of the employee to do something at a higher level. So the most simplest thing that I could think of to automate is invoicing. Why would somebody have to manually look at an invoice to see if it's right? If you build an AI script to create the invoice and another script to double check the invoice to make sure it's accurate and going to the right person and the data is all correct, you could conceivably have that run on an automated basis, but it's not going to do away with the accounts payable department because AI is not going to answer the phone and have a conversation and say, well, Robert, you didn't pay your bill the last 2 months. That's why we're charging you interest. And if you look in your contract, section 10, subsection 3, that talks about the interest that you're going to be charged for non paying your bill. So I think, I was reading an article just this morning on the times in our world where people were questioning whether things were going to replace people. And it all goes all the way back to the 1800s. And, when the steam locomotive became popular and it started moving people around, did it eliminate jobs? No, it created jobs. It opened up a frontier. When we got into the early 20s and the assembly line at the car plants, did it eliminate jobs, the assembly line? No, it made their job easier because they didn't have to push the car or whatever they were building, manually down a runway of some sort to be able to fiddle with it or to put the doors on it or to do whatever on it. So I think of AI as the next evolution of how the workforce is going to evolve around it. So I very much, if somebody was to say to me, Jim, what percentage of the workforce is going to go away because of AI? I'm going to tell you it's a single digit. It's a low single digit because I think those people are still going to be needed to do other activities.
I really enjoy your explanation, and I enjoy the fact that you really put the human touch in all of this. And that brings me to, one of those areas that I want to ask you about teams, culture, and the transformation. I mean, you spend decades helping organizations build high performance teams and also navigate transformation. What, in your opinion, separates healthy cultures from dysfunctional ones?
Um, so a dysfunctional one is easy to spot. And you have a lot of interdepartmental intramurals at play where people aren't working for the same common goal. And there's something in the leadership chain that's broken. And to me, the culture is what you want it to be, but you've got to live it every day. When I walk, when I'm in an office and in an office setting, I'm with the people and I'm walking in with the people and I'm talking to people who may not even know me or may not even work for me. They may even work for another company, but it's an opportunity for me to have an impact on somebody at that very moment, right? By the way, I like that outfit you have on today. That's a beautiful jacket, Robert. That's a great color for you,
Thank you.
right? It doesn't, but it's sincere. I once worked for a company where the CEO of the company had a private parking spot on the side of the building, would come in a side door, and would take the freight elevator up to their office so they didn't have to interact with people. That sets a really tough tone for the culture of that organization. If the leader of that organization can't take 2 minutes to walk into the lobby and ride up in the elevator with the people that support what he's trying to get accomplished, that's a sad culture. And we have a lot of those. We have a lot of those. To me, I think not just in this country, but around the world, we have gone astray from integrity. Nobody trusts each other. We see it in our communities. We see it in the crime statistics. We see it in politics. We see it with world leaders. The lack of distrust has gotten extremely bad. And I believe that if everyone understood what integrity really meant and took the time to commit to it, we'd be in a much better place. I think in Washington, D.C., and I'm not trying to make a political argument one way or the other here, but the aisle wouldn't be so far apart. The aisle would be closer together because even though we may have been elected by different people or a different party, we should all be working for the government. The people don't work for the government. The government works for the people. And that is something that Ronald Reagan said back when he was president. And he truly believed it. And he's one of the few presidents in our lifetime that really united both sides of the aisle. And if you want to look for a great leader in our history, I, Reagan would stick out to me. We came out of the gas crisis of the 70s, high inflation in the 70s. He stabilized things. He did away with some of the free programs, but didn't dispense of all of them. And he made the country a better place. And he made us balance our budget. We've lost all that. We've lost all that. And we're so in debt. What does that say to these young families? It's okay to go in debt. The government can, but the government's not going to bail you out of debt. They're going to, I mean, so to me, the way the parent behaves, the child will behave. And one of my proudest moments, I have 3 kids. They're all off the payroll. They're all off the cell phone plan. They're all off the insurance, and they're all successful. And I asked my middle child, why, what drove you to be who you are and what you've become? And he works for a large technology company. He is 35 years old, and he's been a director for the last 2 years. So at 33, he was appointed a director. That company didn't have directors at age 33. They were all much older. He's also the only director that gets invited to sit at the CEO roundtable as a personal invite from the CEO. He has a seat at that table. And I asked him, I said, where's this come from? He said, Dad, I watched you work at night, even if it was 20 minutes on your laptop to make sure every email was answered. He said, I'm just doing what you taught me. But I never sat down and had that conversation with him and said, hey, I'm doing email now, so I have less to do in the morning and making sure people get responses timely. But he watched and he noticed. And I'm really jealous right now because my son drives a much fancier car than I do and a much more expensive vehicle than I do. But that tells me I did my job as a parent.
Yeah,
And
you
all
did your
three,
job.
and all 3 of my kids are successful. All 3 of my kids are doing what they love. And and I, yes, we made it happen financially for them. But raising kids is, thank God for my wife, because I was always traveling. So she gets the credit because I, I made the statement one day, I never missed a birthday. And that same middle child will say, yes, you did. On my 12th birthday, you weren't here. I said, no, I wasn't. I was in California, but we celebrated your birthday that weekend and I was there. He said, right, but you weren't here on my birthday. And I remember that. And that haunts me to this day that it was noticeable to him, even though I spoke to him that very morning before he went to school to say happy birthday. And I talked with him again in the evening. But that hurt him that I wasn't home. And I could do better than that.
Yes, Jim. Um, but I think you did your job, which is the most important thing. So, as we start to wrap up a few things here, I want you to leave a message for someone listening right now, especially someone who doubts their ability to lead. And I want you to draw a little bit from your book for them to get a message.
The first message I would give anybody who wants to start to look at leadership is to get a mentor. I, having mentored people, I encourage everybody to have a mentor. I have a mentor. In fact, I have more than one mentor. One I'll call for some things, and a different one I'll call for something else. There's nothing wrong with having a mentor. The mentor, though, should not be your manager. And the reason for that is you may have a question about what that manager is doing that you want somebody outside of that environment to help you with. Because that manager may be only giving you something that's self-serving for their own benefit. So I very much believe in mentoring, and I also believe in journaling. Now, today, people are journaling by taking notes on their computer or having AI do it, or the old-fashioned way. I still take notes by hand. And the reason I take notes by hand is I remember the points of the discussion better when I write them out than when I type them out. If I type them, I have to think where the keys are, and that takes brain space away from writing it and really writing the words that I'm thinking and feeling when I'm taking those notes. So the two things that are repetitious in the books, I reference them a couple of times deliberately, is mentoring and journaling. I would also tell you that you need to commit to be, if you want to commit to be a leader, you're committing to be a leader 24/7, and you're going to show up as a leader every day, and you're going to be committed to the framework if you choose to follow it. I can tell you the countless number of people I've mentored who have been brought up on the framework that I put in this book and that are leading successful careers today because of having that framework. So my call to action would be, if you need help finding a mentor, or if you're in a spot where you need somebody to talk to and you don't have anybody, find me. Go to my website. It'll be in the show notes, but it's simply jimcarlough.com. Send me a note. I can't mentor. I have a number of people I mentor today. I speak often. I also have a full-time job, so I don't have the bandwidth to take on much more mentoring, but I do run workshops on the six pillar framework. I do corporate workshops. I do cohorts of small groups that meet once a week, typically late afternoon, early evening for an hour. And we role play and we go through the pillars, and there's quizzes, and there's fun, because these are not easy things to integrity. If you've led a life without it, is hard. Compassion and empathy, if you've not lived it or shown it, is hard. It takes time. And so we spend a lot of time doing role playing just so we can get the feel of what it's like to have an encounter with somebody because of a situation that's going on.
Thank you so much, Jim. We have a tradition at the Voice of Impact. We have a word die right here. That word die has a couple of words, and I'll invite you, I'll read them out so I can invite you to choose two out of the six that I'll read out. One for you and one for a listener. The themes are make a difference, rebuild, overcome, stronger, peace, and patience. I'll repeat again: make a difference, rebuild, overcome, stronger, peace, and patience. So you can choose two.
Um, was it patience to overcome?
Yeah, so there's make a difference. That's one theme.
Okay,
Second is
so
rebuild,
make a
then
difference.
overcome, stronger, peace, patience. So they're different words. Yeah.
For your listeners, make a difference. Do something that you love to do, have fun at it, but make a difference in your work, in your community, and the people that you touch. For me, it's always patience. I like to move fast, and I don't like things to get, well, I can't say I don't like clutter. If you were to look at my desk, you'd see clutter. But um, for me, it's patience. I don't sit still, and my wife doesn't sit near me on the couch because my leg is always shaking. When I was a kid, my parents couldn't sit on the couch because my leg was always shaking. My body was always in motion. My wife even says it shakes in bed and it eventually stops when I fall asleep. But patience is something that I have struggled with because I think I need to be moving faster. And I don't know where that comes from, but I need to have more patience in the things that I do.
Thank you for sharing, Jim. So I know you already made mention of how people could reach you, but now I just want to directly ask you, what's the best way that someone that has listened to this podcast really needs to connect with you, need to learn about six pillars of effective leadership, and about even about your speaking engagements?
My website is loaded with a lot of information. There's even some stuff, there's resources that you can download that are free. I will be putting up a store in the future where you can buy some of the assets. The book is available on Amazon. It's available hardcover, paperback, and also audio and Kindle. Um, the majority of my book sales have been via Amazon worldwide. And I literally have sold copies of my book in Australia, South Africa, uh, India, Europe, um, and so it's getting a lot of. In fact, I ran a Kindle promotion last August and had 700 downloads in India in a 24-hour period, which propelled me to number one. But so the book's available. You can also, on my website is my phone number. If you're in a critical situation and you need to call me, explain who you are, what you need, and I will get back to you. I am hard to reach via phone. The best way to get me, though, is if you log into my website, you can send me a message via my website and it'll go directly to my email. So that's probably the easiest way to get me. Or send me a direct email from your email address. But I am accessible, and if somebody needs my assistance, I'll be glad to give it.
Jim, thank you for reminding us that leadership is not about ego, control, or perfection. It's about character, about trust, about integrity. And ultimately, it's about how we help others grow. And our conversation today, reminds us that leadership is not reserved for a chosen few. I mean, people are not just born into it. It's something developed through intention, reflection, and courage. And to the person listening right now, you do not need a title to begin leading. Sometimes leaders begin the moment they decide to grow into the person others can trust. And as Jim mentioned, leadership is 24/7. It's not a specific period where people need to see you as a leader. The strongest leaders are not the ones who command attention. They are the ones who build trust and integrity. You learned that from Jim today. Jim, we want to appreciate you and thank you for your knowledge and insights on the Voice of Impact show today.
Well, thank you for having me, Robert. I was looking forward to this call. I'm hopeful that your readers, it resonates with them and resonates with you. I believe it does. And if you ever want me to come back, just let me know.
Yes, we'll definitely have you back sometime along the line. For listeners, we're Ndoping and co-performance designers and strategy coaches. We help leaders and organizations create clarity, alignment, and sustainable impact. This has been the Voice of Impact. Until next time, keep growing, keep leading, and keep using your voice.
And it's very simple. Empower as many people as possible. Empower as many leaders as possible. Touch professionals as I can, be able to make a difference